So let me welcome Stephanie Williams. Stephanie, can you hear us? Excellent. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Perfect. And we can see you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, listen, I will turn it over to you maybe to make some opening remarks, and then we'll take some questions. So, Stephanie, please.
Terrific. Thank you very much. So I'd like to just provide a summary of today's high-level ministerial meeting on Libya, which was co-chaired by the Secretary General and the Foreign Minister of Germany. The meeting was attended by the Ministers of Foreign Affairs and senior... Sorry, should I continue?
Please, go ahead.
The meeting was attended by Ministers of Foreign Affairs and senior representatives of state and regional organizations that are part of the Berlin process, as well as from Libya's neighboring countries. On behalf of the Secretary General, I want to thank the Foreign Minister of Germany, Mr. Maas, for convening this important meeting, which sends a critical message that the Libyan people need to hear. It is time to reach a ceasefire and an inclusive political settlement of the crisis. The Secretary General updated participants on recent developments and welcomed progress since the declarations by President Sarraj and Speaker Aguila Saleh in August, as well as the recommendations that emerged from the meetings in Montreux, the meeting in Buznica, and most recently, the meeting in Hurghada. The Secretary General highlighted how recent developments represent a rare opportunity to restore peace in Libya. He stressed that the future of Libya and of the entire region is at stake. He called on all Libyans to act constructively and responsibly to reach a political solution, as well as on the members of the international community to fully shoulder their responsibilities to promote an inclusive political solution. Participants noted that Libya is an important unsolved conflict of our times, with a devastating impact on the Libyan people, but also on Libya's neighbors. They have reaffirmed their commitment to the conclusions of the Conference on Libya held in Berlin in January 2020, as endorsed by Security Council Resolution 2510. Participants called for an inclusive political process where all Libyan political and social components are represented, but also for collective international action in the framework of the Berlin process to resolve the Libyan crisis. They expressed full support for the intention of UNSMIL to reconvene intra-Libyan talks, building on this recent progress. They also emphasized that the UNSMIL facilitated process should be the only game in town to bring Libyans together to forge an inclusive political solution, and that the international community should unite behind and support these UN efforts. Bilateral and regional initiatives should all converge in support of the UN-facilitated process. Participants welcomed the recent lull in hostilities and the de facto truce in central Libya. They stressed the need to immediately stop all foreign military interventions in Libya and violations of the UN arms embargo. They urged Libyans to swiftly implement a demilitarized zone in and around Sirte, but also to agree on a lasting ceasefire in the framework of the 5+5 Joint Military Commission talks, which we expect to reconvene in the coming weeks. They stressed the importance of ensuring the complete and unconditional lifting of the oil blockade to allow the resumption of oil exports. In this regard, the participants welcomed the ongoing discussions in the framework of the economic track regarding the equitable and transparent management of oil revenues among all regions of the country. Participants expressed concern about the deteriorating humanitarian situation and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in Libya, including on migrants and refugees. They welcomed the establishment in June by the Human Rights Council of the fact-finding mission to investigate human rights violations in Libya and committed to support its work. They urged all member states to provide more resettlement and evacuation places for refugees and asylum seekers stranded in Libya. Thank you.
I want to thank the acting special representative. Also, Stephanie, if there's a way for us to get your opening remarks that would be great. We'll go to Edie Lederer from the Associated Press. Edie?
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. On behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, we appreciate your doing this briefing. I have two questions. There seems to be a certain limited degree of optimism that perhaps this meeting might produce some results, but with the arms embargo so widely violated, could you give us any kind of indication from the countries that have been named as the major violators, especially the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, Egypt, others, of their commitments in terms of implementing the arms embargo? And secondly, the Secretary General said that the UN support mission in Libya is making preparations for a series of meetings and consultations that would facilitate the resumption of inclusive intra-Libyan political talks. Can you give us some details on these series of meetings, where and when they're going to take place? Thank you.
Go ahead, Stephanie. Hold on, your microphone is not on. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, question first on really the series of consultations that myself and other members of the mission have been undertaking really since the conclusion of the very fruitful talks that took place in Montreux, Switzerland, which were track 2 talks and that produced some really tangible and we think productive recommendations on the way forward for the political process. So I have now engaged a wide swath of the components, the parties, the constituencies that will comprise the political talks. To update them, first of all, on everything that we have been doing, particularly since the production of the 2 statements, the one by Mr. Siraj and the one by Mr. Aguila Saleh on August 21st, which called for a ceasefire, resumption of oil productions, and a return to the political process. And what I'm hearing from all of these consultations, which include consultations, for instance, with a number of mayors. You know, there are 120 mayors, municipalities across Libya. We need to talk to them. We need to be talking. I've spoken to a large group of women in the last week. I've had consultations with a large number of young Libyans who comprise really a majority of the population. I've had discussions with the 2 chambers, the House of Representatives and the higher state council members, and so on and so forth. So, you know, one of the key recommendations has been for the resumption of the political talks, including that these must be inclusive, fully inclusive talks. That, you know, one of the lessons I think we all learned from the past, couple of years, and certainly even before that, is that excluding key parties is really not a recipe for success in political talks. And so we will make sure that, for instance, minorities are included, as well as those who really have influence on the ground. And one of the other things that I've heard loud and clear from Libyans is that the participants in the political talks should all sign a pledge that they will not put themselves forward, they will not put their own names forward for consideration for senior positions in any new executive that might emerge through the political process, or indeed for the sovereign positions, the 7 key sovereign positions in Libya. And so that I have heard that message. And I have also heard the message about limiting the ability of spoilers to destroy the political process. There are internal spoilers and there are external spoilers. With regards to the violations of the arms embargo, I would refer you also to the very good work of the panel of experts, which is extremely detailed in this regard, voluminous reports on really these egregious violations of the arms embargo. So, you know, stuff and people are still pouring into Libya. So the good thing is we have a lull in hostilities. We basically have a de facto ceasefire on the ground, which is good because that helps the political process. That keeps things calm so that we can get back to the dialogue table. But we are also very trepidatious about this continuing influx of weapons and mercenaries and equipment into the country on both sides. And this really has to stop because it increases the risk of miscalculation on the ground. Thanks.
Thank you.
Could I follow up because I didn't quite hear an answer to my question, though that was very interesting. What did you hear today from countries that are named in the panel of experts report on abiding by the arms embargo? And also, can you give us some dates and places for these next meetings on talks?
So yes, all of these countries, all the countries and organizations that participated in today's meeting, you know, recommitted themselves to the Berlin pledges, the Berlin commitments. Now we need, in practice, we need to see those commitments translated on the ground in order for them to be credible. In terms of planning for the launch, the relaunch of the political dialogue, I am in internal consultations now within the UN. As you can imagine, it is a challenge to convene talks of this scale in the midst of a global pandemic. And I need to ensure that however and wherever we do this, the health and safety of the participants is my first priority. Of course, in addition to the organizers, you know, and my UN colleagues. So this is a very key decision, and I am working the internal traps right now, and I really should have some news in the coming days. Thanks.
Thank you. James Bays, Al Jazeera.
Thank you very much, Acting Special Representative, for doing this. James Bays from Al Jazeera. I know you referred us to the panel of experts report to the UN Security Council, but that is not being published. I mean, we've read it, we've seen leaked copies of it, but it's not being published. It does, though, as you say, have a great big list of those that are violating, notably Turkey, the UAE and Russia. Why do you not call out the names of those countries? Because this has been consistent, and they are the very countries that were taking part in your meeting today. And second question, just on I know you're going to make an announcement soon, but can you give us some idea of the time frame for your big political talks? I'd heard a tentative date of October the 15th in Geneva. Is that seems very, very soon?
So let me tackle the last part of the question first, which is that I would like to do this as soon as possible, preferably before the end of this month. Now, we also are going to be, and this will specifically, the military talks will specifically be taking place in Geneva, and we expect those to resume in the next couple of weeks. We're also, you know, involved in the logistical arrangements for those talks in consultation with our colleagues in Geneva. Those are smaller talks, so you basically have 5 on both sides. So, you know, when we're looking at, you know, the health measures that need to be implemented, it's a little easier to tackle than a much larger scale political dialogue. We are mindful, of course, of you know, other dates that have been put on the calendar, including Prime Minister Siraj's, declaration, announcement that he wishes, to hand over power to a new consensually agreed, executive by the end of October. So we are mindful of the political calendar, and we are working as fast as we can to reconvene these talks. On the issue of, naming and shaming, look, we have never shied away from this, and the panel has also, I think, been explicit. You're right. I mean, I have not actually, seen the full panel report. That is provided to the Sanctions Committee. There is a firewall between the Sanctions Committee and the political mission. But the point being, and there are something like probably 9 countries that are intervening in the Libyan conflict. They all need to stop their intervention. They all need to stop the breaches of the arms embargo. One thing that is true, and that is, I think, quite devastating for the Libyans, is almost their complete loss of sovereignty. And we intend to help them restore that sovereignty through a Libyan-led and Libyan-owned political process that, by the way, should end with the explicit objective of national elections.
Thank you very much. Next question goes to Ibtisam Azam. Ibtisam?
Hi, sir. Thank you, Ms. Williams, for the briefing. My name is Ibtisam Azam from the Daily Arabic, Al-Arab Al-Jadid. I have a follow-up on Edith and James' question regarding the countries and the commitments. Did you hear these commitments before? And when countries pledge that they're not going to give any weapons more to parties to the conflict, is there any guarantees that you have? And my other question is regarding the immigration and asylum seeker. What do you, in Libya and the human rights violations, the question is, what do you wish to see which policies do you wish to have from the European countries changing in order not to, giving the fact that they know very well that sending immigrants back to Libya still means that they will probably face human rights violations. Thank you. If you can have any comments on that, thanks.
Stephanie. Sorry, we can't hear you.
I'm unmuted. Can't you come? Hello?
Go ahead.
Okay, there seems to be like some kind of delay in the connection, and I apologize for that. On the first part of the question, yes, indeed. Of course, we've heard these commitments in the past. I would note that, following the conclusion of the Berlin conference, within just a couple of days, we saw shipments coming in from countries who had participated in Berlin. Now, this, gets to, the international community needs to act in concert. There needs to be pressure placed on those who are violating the UN arms embargo. I would note that I think, Operation Irene has also, I think, played a useful role, and particularly in the last several months, in terms of, helping to uphold and to really bear witness to violations of the arms embargo. But, here's also, frankly, where the members of the Sanctions Committee, need to do their work. Countries need to be sanctioned when they're violating UN resolutions. With regard to the tragic situation of migrants and asylum seekers in Libya and on the seas, the ultimate solution here, of course, is through restoring peace and stability to Libya, and where its institutions can do the needful to protect, vulnerable populations, namely, refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers, and really Libya is not a safe. Libyan ports are not safe ports of return for migrants, and we shouldn't be putting these vulnerable people back into harm's way, whether they're going into Ministry of Interior run detention centers or many unofficial detention centers that are operated in Libya. Thanks.
Thank you. Abdelhamid Sayam.
شكرا جزيلا سيدة ستيفاني ويليام. عبد الحميد صيام من القدس العربي. I have two questions. When Berlin meeting was taking place, and right after it was over, the Secretary General said there are a number of countries who violated the arms embargo, who were meeting in Berlin conference before the ink of the statement dried out. That's what he said. So these same people who were violating the arms embargo in Berlin conference, 19th of January, they were invited to the ministerial meeting today. So what message you sending to the Libyan people if they were violating then and you inviting them again? That's my question, first question. The second, I noticed you mentioned in the statement saying inviting all political and social component of the Libyan people to the negotiations. So are you intentionally excluding the military personnel, those who are the spoilers, who sabotage the Libyan dialogue in the past, especially on April 4, 2019, and they are accused of committing war crimes with the discovery of the mass graves in Misrata and other towns in Libya? Thank you.
Stephanie, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Look, Berlin is an important international framework. It is really the only table around which some of the countries who are directly interfering in the Libyan conflict convene. And it is important for there to be a dialogue around this table. It needs to be a candid dialogue, and what I saw today was a very candid dialogue where many others in the international community were calling for all countries to abide by the UN arms embargo. What we need to see is to turn this negative interference, this very dangerous interference in a country which is already awash in weapons. Libya doesn't need any more weapons. And certainly this is a direct threat to Libya's neighbors. We need to turn that negative interference into positive interference to encourage the Libyans to come to the political dialogue table now. And I think the Libyans are ready to do this. And so what they need is the full support of the international community. With regard to the inclusive nature of the political dialogue, what I will say first is, in Berlin, there are several tracks. We have the political track, we have a military track, and we have an economic track. And then as an overarching umbrella, we have a track for international humanitarian law and human rights, which really, interacts with the other three tracks. So when I say inclusive, I mean inclusive. It is also true that in the military track, we have 5 representatives from each side of the conflict. We have 5 military officers from the Government of National Accord Forces, and we have 5 officers from the Libyan Arab Armed Forces. And these are military talks. They are not political talks. We leave politics at the door when we sit down, and we hope to have, as I said, these talks to resume as soon as possible. Now, there are obviously forces on the ground who have influence and who are then in the political talks represented. They have representatives. They had representatives in the first round of the dialogue, which took place in Geneva in February, and they will have representatives in the upcoming round. Thanks.
Thank you. I know we have to let you go by the top of the hour, so we have time for one more from Ray from Sky News Arabia.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Madam Stephanie. I have two questions, actually. The first one is regarding these initiatives and conferences about Libya. We have seen in Montreux, we have seen Hardaqa, Egypt, Berlin twice, and Buznika in Morocco. Are these conferences and initiatives helping you as a special envoy or making things complicated? Second question, the Secretary General in the opening ceremony of the UNGA, he talks about the phenomenon of the mercenaries, but today he didn't mention this. Is it over or still this problem is going on? Thank you.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
The Secretary General did, of course, explicitly mention the violations of the UN arms embargo, and that includes, it's not only material that's coming in, it is also people in the form of mercenaries, and this is, as we've said, highly unhelpful to ensuring that we, are able to keep some calm on the ground and resume the political track. Thank you for mentioning the meetings that have taken place in the last month or so. Yes, they are all in consultation with me, with the UNSMIL mission. So the Buznika talks are talks that bring together representatives from the House of Representatives and the Higher State Council to agree, the competencies for the seven sovereign positions under Article 15 of the Libyan political agreement. And this also helps to build confidence between these two chambers, which have sometimes, not really cooperated. This is good for the resumption of the full political process. Similarly, in Hurghada, there were face-to-face talks. These were the first face-to-face talks between, security and military actors. Under UNSMIL, they were hosted by the Egyptians, but under UNSMIL auspices. It was UNSMIL who was in the room for those talks. And so those talks were also important confidence-building measures. They really made some key recommendations about, the release of people who have been arrested because of identity accusations, and also, essentially prisoners taken during the course of the conflict. They also called for the resumption of all flights within the country and to open the roads to allow Libyans, to be able to travel. And they also called for direct face-to-face talks at the Joint Military Commission as soon as possible to really discuss, the details of this proposal for a demilitarized zone in central Libya, starting with the city of Sirte, where 130,000 civilians are directly in harm's way. We have had several rounds of the JMC previously, but they were not face-to-face. They were parallel talks. Now the Libyans want to meet face-to-face. I think that's a very positive step, and we are working, as I said, very hard to convene those talks in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for, an announcement on a date. Thank you.
Stephanie, thank you so much. For the record, Stephanie Williams, the acting special representative, was joining us from Tunis. And good luck with everything coming in the days and weeks ahead. And we look forward to welcoming you back here virtually or in person, inshallah. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye.